The dust storm appeared on the horizon like an angry god, swallowing the Kansas prairie whole, as Olivia Harrington clutched her carpetbag and eyed the approaching darkness with dread. She had come too far to turn back now, 1,200 miles from Boston to Leavenworth, chasing a promise of a teaching position that might not even exist anymore. The stagecoach driver had abandoned her at this outpost an hour ago with a shrug and a muttered apology about the coming storm, leaving her alone with nothing but her meager possessions and fading hope. "Madam, you'd best get inside unless you're fixing to become part of the territory," a deep voice called out over the rising wind. Olivia turned to find a tall man standing in the doorway of what appeared to be the only general store in this miserable outpost. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat, but she could make out a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble. His clothes were dusty and worn, but his stance suggested confidence, the kind that came from surviving in a place that seemed determined to kill you. "Thank you," she managed, gathering her skirts and hurrying toward the shelter he offered. Inside, the store was dimly lit but mercifully still. A handful of men huddled around a potbelly stove, eyeing her with curiosity but not hostility. The man who had called to her closed the door firmly against the howling wind. "Grant Eastwood," he said simply, extending a calloused hand. "You picked a poor day to arrive in these parts." "Olivia Harrington," she replied, briefly touching his hand. "I didn't exactly have a choice in the matter." The stage driver seemed rather determined to continue his route, storm or no storm. Grant nodded, unsurprised. "Jenkins values his schedule more than his passengers. You're heading to Leavenworth proper?" "Yes, I've been hired to teach at the new school." A flicker of something recognition perhaps crossed his face. "The schoolhouse on Elm Street, the very same." "Do you know it?" Before he could answer, the door burst open and a small figure tumbled in, slamming it closed against the wind. A boy, no more than 10 years old, stood panting with his back against the door. His clothes were coated with dust, but his face lit up when he spotted Grant. "Pa, I got everything on the list before the storm hit." The boy rushed over to Grant, proudly producing a small parcel from his jacket. Only then did he notice Olivia, his eyes widening with curiosity. "Samuel, this is Miss Harrington," Grant said, resting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "She's to be the new teacher in Leavenworth." Samuel's face broke into a genuine smile. "Really? The new teacher?" "Pa said you might not come after what happened to Miss Winters." Grant cleared his throat sharply. "Samuel, why don't you help Mr. Peterson sort those new shipments while Miss Harrington and I discuss her travel arrangements?" The boy nodded and scampered off, leaving Olivia with a sinking feeling in her stomach. "What happened to Miss Winters?" she asked quietly. Grant's expression darkened. "Nothing for you to worry about. She decided teaching wasn't for her after all. Leavenworth can be challenging for Easterners." Olivia straightened her spine. "I assure you, Mr. Eastwood, I'm made of sterner stuff than you might imagine." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt it, Miss Harrington. Not many women would travel alone to the frontier." The storm raged outside, rattling the windows and sending dust through every crack in the building. Grant explained that they'd have to wait it out before continuing the final 10 miles to Leavenworth. As the hours passed, Olivia found herself drawn to Samuel, who was bright and talkative once his initial shyness wore off. He proudly told her about his father's ranch outside of town and how they raised some of the finest horses in the territory. When evening approached and the storm showed no signs of abating, the store owner, Mr. Peterson, offered Olivia the small room above the store for the night. "It ain't fancy," he warned, "but it's clean and dry." "Thank you," she said gratefully. "I appreciate your kindness." As she prepared to retire for the evening, Samuel tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Harrington, I drew this today. Would you like to see it?" He thrust a folded piece of paper into her hands before she could respond. Olivia carefully unfolded it to find a charcoal drawing of 3 figures standing in front of a house. There was a tall man, clearly Grant, a smaller figure that must be Samuel, and between them, a space where another figure had been erased. "It's my family," Samuel explained proudly. "That's Pa and that's me." "It's very good," Olivia said sincerely. "But who was here?" She pointed to the erased spot. Samuel's face fell slightly. "That was Ma, but I can't remember her face good enough anymore. Pa doesn't have any pictures." Grant appeared behind his son, his expression unreadable. "It's time for bed, Samuel." "But Pa," the boy protested, "I was showing Miss Harrington my drawing." "It's a fine drawing," Grant said softly, then looked at Olivia. "My wife died 6 years ago, cholera." "I'm sorry," Olivia said, feeling the weight of loss that hung between father and son. Samuel took the drawing back and pointed to the empty space. "I saved you a spot beside Pa," he said innocently. "Since you're going to be our new teacher, maybe you could come visit us sometimes. Pa gets lonely." "Samuel," Grant's voice was sharp with embarrassment. "Well, you do," the boy insisted before yawning widely. "Upstairs with you now," Grant directed, his tone brooking no argument. Samuel nodded sleepily, but before heading up the narrow stairs, he pressed the drawing into Olivia's hands. "You keep it," he whispered. "Maybe it'll help you remember us." As the boy disappeared upstairs, Olivia and Grant stood in uncomfortable silence. "Children have a way of speaking their minds," she finally offered. Grant ran a hand through his hair. "Samuel hasn't had much of a woman's influence." "I apologize if he made you uncomfortable." "Not at all. He's a wonderful boy. You should be proud." "I am," Grant said simply, and in those 2 words, Olivia heard the depth of his love for his son. The storm finally broke before dawn, and when Olivia awoke, the world outside was transformed. The prairie had a freshly scrubbed look, as if the dust storm had been both destroyer and cleanser. Grant had already hitched his wagon and was preparing to drive her into Leavenworth. "The stage won't come through for another 3 days," he explained. "Samuel and I are heading back anyway." The journey to Leavenworth was filled with Samuel's chatter and Grant's occasional comments about the land they passed. Olivia learned that Grant's ranch, the Double E, was one of the most successful in the county, though he spoke of it with a modesty that she found refreshing after the boastful men she'd known back east. As they crested a hill, Leavenworth came into view, a proper town with wooden buildings lining the main street, a church steeple rising above the rooftops, and the promise of civilization that Olivia had been beginning to fear she'd left behind forever. "There's your school," Grant pointed to a white building set slightly apart from the town. "Mayor Dixon had it built last year. He's determined to bring culture to Leavenworth." Olivia's heart lifted at the sight. It was smaller than the academies she'd taught at in Boston, but it was neat and well constructed. For the first time since embarking on this journey, she felt certain she had made the right choice. Grant dropped her at the boarding house run by Mrs. Wilson, a plump, no-nonsense widow who looked Olivia up and down with shrewd assessment before declaring her skinny but decent-looking enough. "The school term doesn't start for another 2 weeks," Mrs. Wilson informed her. "Gives you time to settle in and meet the families." As Grant prepared to leave, Samuel threw his arms around Olivia's waist. "You'll come visit us, won't you? We live just 3 miles out of town." "If your father approves," Olivia said carefully, looking to Grant. He hesitated, then nodded. "You're welcome at the Double E, Miss Harrington. Perhaps this Sunday after church. Most of the families with school-aged children will be there, and it might be good for you to meet them." "I'd like that," Olivia said, surprised at how much she meant it. As their wagon pulled away, Samuel waved enthusiastically while Grant gave a more reserved tip of his hat. Watching them go, Olivia wondered about the erased figure in Samuel's drawing and the space he had saved beside his father, a space he seemed all too eager to fill with a new presence. Leavenworth proved to be a more complex place than Olivia had anticipated. While the town itself showed signs of growing prosperity, a bank, several shops, a hotel in addition to Mrs. Wilson's boarding house, there was an undercurrent of tension she hadn't expected. Much of it centered around the railroad that was pushing westward, and the cattle drives that brought both commerce and chaos to the region. During her first week, Olivia met with Mayor Dixon, a portly man with political ambitions that extended well beyond Leavenworth. He made it clear that the school was his pet project, intended to attract more quality families to the area. "Education is the mark of civilization, Miss Harrington," he declared pompously. "And civilization brings investment." She also met several of her future pupils and their parents, many of whom seemed genuinely pleased to have a qualified teacher for their children. Others, particularly the ranchers and farmers from outlying areas, appeared more skeptical of what they termed book learning. "My boy needs to know how to work cattle, not Latin," one weather-beaten man told her flatly. "Perhaps I could teach him both," Olivia suggested with a smile that disarmed him enough to grunt what might have been approval. Throughout the week, Olivia found herself thinking often of Grant and Samuel. The boy's innocent drawing and his father's quiet dignity had made an impression she couldn't easily dismiss. She told herself it was natural to be curious about them after all. Samuel would be her student soon enough. Sunday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Olivia wore her best dress, a blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes, and walked with Mrs. Wilson to the white clapboard church at the center of town. The service was simple but heartfelt, the congregation a mix of townspeople and farming families who had traveled in for the occasion. She spotted Grant and Samuel in a pew near the back. Grant looked transformed in his Sunday best, clean-shaven, his dark hair neatly combed, his usual weathered expression softened by the solemnity of the service. Samuel, fidgeting beside him, brightened visibly when he saw Olivia and waved eagerly until Grant placed a restraining hand on his shoulder. After the service, as people gathered outside to socialize, Samuel broke away from his father and raced to Olivia's side. "You're coming to our house for dinner, aren't you?" he asked breathlessly. "Pa killed a chicken specially," Samuel, Grant said as he approached, his tone gently reproving. "Miss Harrington may have other plans." "Actually, I was looking forward to your invitation," Olivia admitted, "if it still stands." Something flickered in Grant's eyes, pleasure perhaps, or surprise. "Of course, our home is humble, but you're welcome to it." The double E was anything but humble. The main house was a substantial two-story structure built of solid timber, with a wide porch wrapping around three sides. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, bunkhouse, and what appeared to be a blacksmith shop. A corral near the house held several magnificent horses, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. "It's beautiful," Olivia said sincerely as Grant helped her down from the wagon. "Been building it up for 12 years now," he said, a note of pride in his voice. Started with nothing but acclaim and determination. Inside, the house was unexpectedly comfortable. The furniture was simple but well-crafted, the floors covered with braided rugs, and the windows hung with checked curtains that softened the strong western light. But there were signs of a woman's absence: mismatched dishes set out for dinner, a layer of dust on the mantelpiece, boots and books scattered in corners. Samuel gave her an enthusiastic tour, pointing out his room upstairs with its treasured collection of arrowheads and polished stones, the study where Grant kept his ledgers and maps, and finally, the kitchen where dinner was waiting. "The chicken smells wonderful," Olivia commented as Grant carved the roasted bird. "Mabel from town helped with it yesterday," Samuel admitted. "Pa can cook some, but not fancy things." "I manage," Grant said, passing Olivia a plate. "Samuel and I don't stand on ceremony much." The meal was simple but delicious: roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and preserved peaches for dessert. Conversation flowed more easily than Olivia expected, with Samuel providing most of the chatter but Grant occasionally offering observations about the area, the school, and the changes coming with the railroad. After dinner, as the sun began to set, Grant suggested they sit on the porch. Samuel brought out his latest drawings to show Olivia, spreading them across her lap with pride. "You have real talent," she told him, genuinely impressed by the boy's eye for detail. "We'll certainly encourage this at school." "Pa says drawing won't put food on the table," Samuel said, though without resentment. Grant shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I said it's good to have practical skills alongside your natural gifts." Olivia smiled at the diplomatic clarification. "Your father's right, but art has its place too. It helps us see the world differently." As dusk deepened into evening, Samuel's energy finally waned, and he reluctantly agreed to go to bed after extracting a promise from Olivia to visit again soon. Left alone with Grant on the porch, Olivia found herself suddenly aware of his presence in a way she hadn't been before. The crickets sang in the tall grass, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. "He's very fond of you already," Grant said, breaking the silence. "I haven't seen him take to someone so quickly since." He trailed off. Since his mother, Grant nodded, his profile strong against the darkening sky. "Catherine was gentle but strong-willed. Samuel has her spirit. How did you meet her?" Olivia asked, curious about the woman who had left such a void. "She was a schoolteacher," Grant said with a sad smile. "Came out from St. Louis full of ideas about educating the frontier. We married 6 months after she arrived." "And she died of cholera," Olivia said softly, remembering what he'd told her during the dust storm. "Along with 15 others that summer. Samuel was barely 4. His hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "That's why some people in town were surprised when Mayor Dixon announced he'd hired another teacher from back east. There's a superstition about it now," understanding dawned on Olivia. "That's what Samuel meant about Miss Winters," Grant sighed. "Jenny Winters wasn't up to the challenge. She left after 2 months, claimed the climate didn't agree with her. But it was more than that. Teaching here isn't like teaching in Boston. These children need practical knowledge alongside their arithmetic and literature." "I understand that," Olivia said earnestly. "And I'm not afraid of challenges, Mr. Eastwood." "Grant," he corrected her. "If you're going to be Samuel's teacher, we should be on a first-name basis." "Olivia," she offered in return. He nodded, and they fell silent again, watching as stars emerged in the vast Kansas sky. The moment felt significant somehow, as if they'd crossed an invisible boundary. Finally, Grant stood. "It's getting late. I should take you back to town." The ride back to Mrs. Wilson's boarding house was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Grant helped Olivia down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "Thank you for today," she said. "Samuel is a wonderful boy." "He is," Grant agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "And he needs a teacher who sees that. I think he may have found one." Olivia smiled up at him, aware of his hands still lingering at her waist. For a moment, something electric passed between them, possibility perhaps, or recognition. Then Grant stepped back, touching the brim of his hat. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Grant." As she watched him drive away, Olivia knew with sudden certainty that her life in Leavenworth would be nothing like she had imagined. And somehow, that thought didn't trouble her at all. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Olivia spent her days at the schoolhouse, organizing supplies, planning lessons, and becoming familiar with the textbooks Mayor Dixon had proudly imported from Chicago. In the evenings, she often found herself invited to dinner at various homes, as the families of Leavenworth sized up their new teacher. Grant and Samuel appeared in town regularly, ostensibly for supplies or business at the bank, but their path invariably crossed with Olivia's. Samuel would race to her side, eager to show her a new drawing or tell her about a colt that had been born at the ranch. Grant's greetings were more reserved, but his eyes followed her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. 3 days before school was to begin, a late summer thunderstorm struck with ferocious intensity. Lightning split the sky, and rain pounded the streets of Leavenworth into rivers of mud. Olivia had stayed late at the schoolhouse, arranging books and writing out lessons on the blackboard. By the time she noticed the darkening sky, it was too late to make it back to the boarding house before the deluge hit. She stood in the doorway of the school, watching the rain with dismay, when a wagon appeared through the curtain of water. Grant pulled up as close as he could, jumping down and splashing through puddles to reach her. "You're stranded," he said, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "So it would appear," she agreed, trying to sound more cheerful than she felt. "I've got a tarp in the wagon. If you're willing to make a run for it, I can get you back to Mrs. Wilson's." Olivia hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Lead the way." Grant took off his coat and held it over her head as they dashed to the wagon. Even with this protection, Olivia was soaked by the time she climbed aboard. Grant spread the tarp over her and took up the reins, urging the horses forward through the storm. The normally brief journey took 3 times as long, with the horses struggling through mud and water rushing across the road in places. When they finally reached the boarding house, Mrs. Wilson met them at the door, clucking with concern. "You're both drenched to the bone," she declared. "Mr. Eastwood, you'd best come in until this passes. I'll put on some coffee." Inside, Mrs. Wilson bustled about, bringing towels and directing Olivia to change immediately. When Olivia returned downstairs in a dry dress, her hair still damp but combed, she found Grant standing by the fire in the parlor. He had removed his wet coat and hat, and his shirt clung to his broad shoulders. "Mrs. Wilson insisted I stay until the worst passes," he explained, seeming almost apologetic. "I'm glad," Olivia said honestly. "And thank you for rescuing me. I might have spent the night at the school otherwise." Grant's mouth curved in a half-smile. "Samuel would never forgive me if I let his favorite teacher catch pneumonia before classes even start." "His favorite teacher? I haven't taught him a single lesson yet." "You've taught him that adults can see beyond the practical to the possible," Grant said, his voice dropping lower. "That's a lesson I'd forgotten myself." Before Olivia could respond, Mrs. Wilson appeared with a tray of coffee and biscuits, effectively breaking the moment. The 3 of them sat listening to the storm rage outside while discussing the upcoming school year and the town's prospects with the railroad coming. "It will change everything," Mrs. Wilson predicted. "Some say for the better, bringing progress and new people. Others fear it will bring the wrong sort of change." "Change is inevitable," Grant said. "The question is whether we shape it or let it shape us." Olivia studied him, struck by the thoughtfulness behind his words. For a man who had carved his living from the harsh prairie, he possessed a philosopher's heart. The storm eventually subsided enough for Grant to take his leave. At the door, he paused, looking down at Olivia with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Samuel asked if you might join us for Sunday dinner again," he said. "After church." "I'd like that very much," Olivia replied. "Good," Grant said simply, and with a tip of his hat to both women, he was gone into the rainy night. Mrs. Wilson closed the door firmly behind him, then turned to Olivia with knowing eyes. "That man hasn't looked at a woman that way since Catherine died," she observed. "And I've known Grant Eastwood since he first staked his claim here with nothing but dreams and determination." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "Mrs. Wilson, I hardly think, don't bother denying it," the older woman interrupted with a wave of her hand. "I've got eyes in my head, just be careful. Hearts that have been broken once break more easily the second time." With that cryptic warning, Mrs. Wilson collected the coffee cups and left Olivia alone with her thoughts. The first day of school arrived with clear skies and autumn crispness in the air. 34 children of varying ages filed into the schoolhouse, their expressions ranging from excitement to trepidation to outright hostility. Samuel was among the first to arrive, his hair slicked down with water and his face shining from what must have been a vigorous scrubbing. "I brought you this," he said, presenting Olivia with an apple. "Pa says it's tradition." "It is indeed," she confirmed with a smile, placing the apple on her desk. "Thank you, Samuel." The day proceeded better than Olivia had dared hope. The younger children were eager to learn, the middle group willing if sometimes distracted, and even the oldest boys, the ones she had worried might be the most resistant, showed grudging respect, when she demonstrated her knowledge of both literature and practical mathematics. By the end of the week, Olivia had established a routine that seemed to work for the diverse group. Mornings were devoted to reading, writing, and arithmetic, with the older students often helping the younger ones. Afternoons included history, geography, and what Olivia called practical studies lessons on local plants, animals, weather patterns, and basic principles of agriculture and animal husbandry. She also set aside time each Friday afternoon for what she termed creative expression. The children could draw, write stories, perform short plays, or create crafts. This was Samuel's favorite time, and his drawings became more ambitious with each passing week. Sundays became a cherished ritual church in the morning, followed by dinner at the Double E. Sometimes other families joined them, but often it was just the three of them, creating a comfortable pattern that began to feel like the family unit Samuel had drawn. As September gave way to October, the prairie took on the golden hue of autumn, and Olivia found herself falling in love not just with Grant, though those feelings deepened with each passing day, but with Leavenworth, with teaching, with the vastness of the Kansas sky, and with the sense of purpose she had found here. One crisp Saturday in mid-October, Grant invited her to ride out with him and Samuel to check on a herd of cattle being moved to winter pasture. Mrs. Wilson raised an eyebrow at the invitation, but made no comment as Olivia accepted eagerly. Grant brought a gentle mare for Olivia to ride, and though she had limited experience with horses, she found her balance quickly under his patient instruction. They rode across the rolling prairie, the tall grass brushing against the horse's legs, hawks circling overhead in the impossibly blue sky. Samuel rode ahead, whooping with the sheer joy of freedom while Grant and Olivia followed at a more sedate pace. "He's a natural horseman," Olivia observed, watching the boy guide his pony with easy confidence. "Born to it," Grant agreed. Catherine was terrified of horses. "Used to say Samuel must have gotten his love of riding from my side of the family." It was the first time he had mentioned his late wife without being prompted, and Olivia took it as a sign of growing trust between them. "Tell me more about her," she said gently. Grant was silent for so long that Olivia thought he might not answer. Then he sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "She was brave," he said finally. "Coming out here alone, teaching in a half-built town, marrying a man with nothing but ambition and a land claim. She believed in me when I hardly believed in myself. She sounds remarkable," she was, and losing her. Grant shook his head. "It nearly destroyed me. If it hadn't been for Samuel needing me, I might have given up entirely." "But you didn't," Olivia said softly. "You built something beautiful here." Grant turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the endless sky. "It's taken me years to see beauty in this life again." The words hung between them, full of meaning Olivia hardly dared interpret. Before she could respond, Samuel came galloping back toward them. "Pa, the cattle are just over that ridge. Can Miss Harrington see them up close?" The moment broken, Grant nodded. "If she's comfortable with that." "I'd love to," Olivia assured them both. They spent the afternoon with the cattle and the cowboys who managed them. Olivia listened, fascinated, as Grant explained the operation of the ranch and his plans for expanding his breeding program. Later, they shared a picnic lunch by a small creek, Samuel entertaining them with stories about his classmates and their various misadventures. As they rode back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon, Olivia felt a profound contentment she had never known in Boston. There, she had always been striving for recognition, for independence, for something she couldn't quite define. Here, riding beside Grant with Samuel chattering ahead of them, she felt as if she had found whatever it was she had been seeking. At the ranch, as Grant helped her dismount, his hands lingered at her waist. Olivia looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "Thank you for today," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Olivia," Grant began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with what he wanted to say. "Yes," before he could continue, Samuel called from the porch, "Pa, Miss Harrington, come quick, look what I found in the barn." The moment shattered, Grant released her with reluctance. "We'd better see what treasure he's discovered this time," he said with a rueful smile. Samuel's discovery turned out to be a litter of kittens, hidden in the hay by one of the barn cats. As they all knelt around the nest of tiny mewing creatures, Samuel looked up at Olivia with shining eyes. "Can we keep them, Pa, all of them?" "Barns always got room for good mousers," Grant agreed. "But they need to stay with their mother for now." As darkness fell, Grant drove Olivia back to town in the wagon. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. They spoke little during the journey, but the silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken feelings that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. At Mrs. Wilson's door, Grant helped Olivia down, then surprised her by taking both her hands in his. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low and serious, "about what you said today about building something beautiful here." Olivia's heart quickened. "Yes. I never thought I'd find someone who could see beauty in this life the way Catherine did. Someone who could understand what I'm trying to build for Samuel, for our future." "Grant, let me finish, please," he said, his grip on her hands tightening slightly. "I know it hasn't been long, but I feel as though I've known you much longer. Samuel adores you, and I—" He trailed off, then took a deep breath. "I find myself thinking about you when you're not around, wondering what you'd think about a new colt or how you'd handle a problem with the ranch hands. It's like you've become part of our lives without either of us realizing it was happening." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "I came here looking for a new beginning, but I never expected to find a place that would feel so much like home." Grant's expression softened, and he raised one hand to touch her cheek. "I'm not asking for anything now. It's too soon, and there's Samuel to consider. But I wanted you to know that I see a future when I look at you, Olivia, one I'd thought was lost to me forever." Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her gently, his lips warm against hers in the cold night air. The kiss was brief but held the promise of more to come, of feelings too deep to express in words. When he pulled back, Olivia was breathless. "Grant, I will talk more tomorrow," he promised, touching her cheek once more. "After church." Olivia nodded, unable to find the right words. Grant helped her to the door, waited until she was safely inside, then departed with a tip of his hat that somehow conveyed more tenderness than any elaborate gesture could have done. Inside, Olivia leaned against the closed door, her fingers touching her lips where his had been. Mrs. Wilson appeared in the hallway, took one look at Olivia's face and smiled knowingly. "About time," was all she said before returning to her knitting in the parlor. The next morning dawned clear but bitterly cold, with a sharp wind from the north that made the church congregation hurry inside with minimal socializing beforehand. Olivia sat with Mrs. Wilson, trying not to be too obvious as she looked for Grant and Samuel. They slipped in just as the service was beginning, Samuel's hair still damp from his weekly washing, Grant looking handsome and somehow younger in his Sunday clothes. When he caught Olivia's eye, he gave her a smile that made her heart skip. After the service, as people huddled in groups discussing the prediction of an early winter, Samuel made his way to Olivia's side. "Are you still coming for dinner?" he asked anxiously. "Pa made a stew yesterday, and we've got apple pie from Mrs. Johnson." "I wouldn't miss it," Olivia assured him, smiling as Grant approached. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that belied the cold day. "Ready to brave the wind." The ride to the Double E was chilly but brightened by Samuel's chatter about the kittens and his plans to build them a special box in the barn. Olivia found herself studying Grant's profile as he drove, remembering the feel of his lips on hers and wondering what today's conversation might bring. At the ranch, they hurried inside to the warmth of the kitchen where a pot of stew simmered on the stove. While Grant tended to the fire, Samuel insisted on showing Olivia his latest drawings, spread out on the table in the main room. "This one's of the new kittens," he explained, pointing to a surprisingly detailed sketch. And this one's of the ranch in springtime. See, I put in all the new calves. They're wonderful, Samuel, Olivia said sincerely. You truly have a gift. As she turned to the next drawing, she felt her breath catch. It was a picture of 3 figures standing in front of the ranch house. Grant and Samuel were clearly recognizable, but this time, the third figure wasn't erased or blank. Instead, Samuel had drawn a woman with curly hair and a long dress, her hand linked with Grant's. Is this? Olivia began, not quite daring to finish the question. It's you, Samuel said matter-of-factly. With me and Pa, I told you I saved a spot, remember? Beside Pa. Grant entered the room at that moment, carrying a tray with coffee and cups. When he saw what Samuel was showing Olivia, he set the tray down with exaggerated care. Samuel, why don't you go check on those kittens before dinner? Make sure they're warm enough with this north wind. The boy hesitated, looking between them with sudden uncertainty. But I wanted to show Miss Harrington all my drawings. There'll be time after dinner, Grant assured him. Go on now. When Samuel had reluctantly departed, Grant approached the table and looked down at the drawing. He's been working on that one for weeks, he said quietly. Wouldn't let me see it until it was finished. It's very sweet, Olivia said, feeling suddenly shy. He has quite an imagination. Does he? Grant moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. Or maybe he just sees what's already there, waiting to happen. Olivia looked up at him, her heart pounding. Grant, last night, what you said. I meant every word, he said firmly, but I know it's fast, too fast maybe. You came here to teach, not to be swept into a ready-made family. Is that what you're offering? Olivia asked, needing to hear him say it plainly. Grant took her hands in his, just as he had the night before. I'm offering everything I have, he said simply. The ranch, a home, a future. I'm offering to love you, Olivia, if you'll let me. Tears blurred her vision as she squeezed his hands. I came to Leavenworth looking for a new beginning, she said. I never imagined I might find a family waiting for me. Is that a yes? Grant asked, his voice rough with emotion. It's a yes to the beginning, Olivia said carefully. I care for you deeply, Grant, and I adore Samuel, but let's give ourselves time to be certain, for his sake as much as ours. Grant nodded, understanding in his eyes. Time we have plenty of, he agreed. As long as I know you're open to the possibility of a future together. More than open to it, Olivia admitted. Hoping for it. He kissed her then, a deeper, more confident kiss than the one they had shared the night before. Olivia melted into it, her hands moving to his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. They broke apart at the sound of the door opening, turning to find Samuel standing there with a knowing grin. I knew it, he crowed triumphantly. I told Billy Johnson that you were going to be my new ma, and he said I was making it up, but I knew. Grant cleared his throat. Samuel, that's not exactly, we're taking things slowly, Olivia interjected gently, moving to kneel in front of the boy. Your father and I care for each other very much, and we both care for you, but becoming a family is a big decision that takes time. Samuel's face fell slightly. How much time? Grant ruffled his son's hair. Enough time to be sure, but not so long that you'll grow a beard waiting, he said lightly. Now, how about that dinner? I'm starving. The meal was filled with comfortable conversation and occasional moments when Olivia would catch Grant watching her with an expression of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe she was really there. Afterward, Samuel insisted on showing her the rest of his drawings, including several of the school and his classmates. As evening approached, Grant suggested Samuel might want to work on his reading assignment for the next day. The boy protested initially but eventually trudged upstairs with his book, leaving Grant and Olivia alone by the fire. He's already planning our future, Grant observed, settling beside Olivia on the sofa. Children often see things more clearly than adults, Olivia replied. Without all our complications and fears. Grant took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. And what are your fears, Olivia? She considered the question seriously. That I might not be what Samuel needs, that I could never replace his mother. No one's asking you to replace Catherine, Grant said firmly. Samuel barely remembers her. He needs someone to love him now as he is. "And you?" Olivia asked softly. "What are your fears?" Grant was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. "That history might repeat itself," he finally admitted. "That I might find happiness only to lose it again." Olivia turned to face him fully. "Life offers no guarantees, Grant. We both know that, but isn't love worth the risk?" Instead of answering with words, Grant pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying everything he couldn't say. Olivia responded with equal fervor, her hands threading through his hair as she pressed closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Grant rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not tonight, but someday, stay with us." "I will," Olivia promised, the certainty of her decision filling her with unexpected peace. "Someday soon." The weeks that followed took on a dreamlike quality for Olivia. Her days were filled with teaching, which brought its own satisfactions as she watched her students grow in knowledge and confidence. Her evenings were often spent at the Double E, where she, Grant, and Samuel gradually formed the bonds of family. In town, people began to take notice. Some, like Mrs. Wilson, observed the developing relationship with approval. Others, particularly the unmarried women of Leavenworth who had set their caps for the prosperous rancher, were less enthusiastic. Mayor Dixon made a point of reminding Olivia that the school board expected teachers to maintain the highest moral standards. "Your personal life is your own affair, Miss Harrington," he said pompously during one of his frequent inspections of the school. "But appearances matter in a position of such influence." "I assure you, Mayor Dixon, my conduct is above reproach," Olivia replied calmly. "Mr. Eastwood and I are building a friendship that includes his son, who is one of my pupils. There is nothing improper in that." The mayor harumphed, but could find no specific fault to criticize. November brought the first snow, earlier than usual, confirming the old-timers' predictions of a harsh winter. School attendance became erratic as families from outlying farms and ranches found travel difficult or impossible on the worst days. Grant worried about Olivia making the journey between town and the schoolhouse, often sending one of his ranch hands to escort her on horseback when the snow was deep. On weekends, if the roads were passable, he would bring her to the Double E, sometimes for the entire weekend with Mrs. Wilson's grudging approval as chaperone. It was during one such weekend in early December that Grant formally proposed. Mrs. Wilson had retired early, claiming fatigue from the journey, and Samuel had fallen asleep by the fire after an exhausting day of sledding on the hills behind the ranch. Grant and Olivia sat together on the sofa, watching the flames dance in the hearth. Outside, snow fell in a gentle curtain, muffling the world in white silence. "I've been thinking," Grant said, his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "A dangerous pastime," she teased, nestling closer to his warmth. "Indeed." He smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I've been thinking about Christmas. It's Samuel's favorite time of year, but it's always been difficult for me since Catherine died." Olivia nodded, understanding. "The holidays make absence more noticeable." "Yes, but this year feels different." Grant shifted to face her, taking both her hands in his. "This year, I find myself looking forward to Christmas morning, to creating new traditions, to starting fresh." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "I wanted to wait until Christmas, but I find I don't want to wait another day." Olivia's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my grandmother's," Grant explained. "I've kept it all these years, never thinking I'd find someone I wanted to give it to." "Grant," Olivia whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Olivia Harrington, will you marry me? Will you make a family with Samuel and me? Will you fill that space he saved for you in his drawing?" The tears spilled over as Olivia nodded, unable to speak for the emotion constricting her throat. When she finally found her voice, it was barely audible. "Yes, yes to all of it." Grant slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise that words could never fully express. A small sound made them break apart. Samuel stood in the doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Did she say yes, Pa?" he asked, his voice thick with drowsiness. Grant laughed, reaching out an arm to his son. "Come here, you little eavesdropper." "Yes," she said, "yes." Samuel hurried over, throwing himself onto the sofa between them. "So you're really going to be my new ma?" Olivia put her arm around the boy, drawing him close. "If that's what you'd like to call me, Samuel." "I would," he said decisively, "and I think my real ma would be happy. Pa says she wouldn't have wanted him to be lonely forever." Grant's eyes met Olivia's over Samuel's head, conveying a depth of feeling that made her heart swell. "Your father is a wise man," she said softly. "When's the wedding?" Samuel asked, suddenly wide awake. "Can I be the ring bearer?" Billy Johnson was ring bearer at his uncle's wedding and got to wear a special suit. "We haven't decided on a date yet," Grant said, amused by his son's enthusiasm. "But yes, you can definitely be the ring bearer. And can I show everyone my drawing, the one with all three of us?" "I think that would be perfect," Olivia said, touching the boy's cheek affectionately. Later, after Samuel had been tucked back into bed, Grant and Olivia stood together at the window, watching the snow transform the landscape into a pristine wonderland. "Are you sure about this?" Grant asked quietly. "Becoming a rancher's wife is a far cry from teaching in Boston. It's a hard life sometimes." Olivia turned in his arms, her expression serious. "I've never been more certain of anything," she said. "The life I had in Boston was incomplete. I was searching for something without knowing what it was." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Now I know, it was this. You, Samuel, this place, it was family." Grant pulled her close, his embrace fierce and protective. "I never thought I'd have this chance again," he murmured against her hair. "To love someone, to build a life together." "We have that chance now," Olivia said, "and I intend to make the most of every day of it." They decided on a Christmas Eve wedding, a small ceremony in the church followed by a celebration at the Double E. The news spread quickly through Leavenworth, causing a flurry of gossip that Olivia did her best to ignore. She continued teaching, determined to fulfill her commitment to the school at least until the spring term ended, though Grant teased that he might have to hire a tutor for Samuel if the winter continued to make travel difficult. The weeks leading up to Christmas passed in a blur of preparation. Olivia divided her time between the schoolhouse, where she organized a holiday pageant, and the ranch, where she and Grant planned their future together. Samuel threw himself into both projects with enthusiasm, proudly announcing to anyone who would listen that Miss Harrington was going to be his new mother, Mrs. Wilson helped Olivia alter a blue silk dress she had brought from Boston but never worn, adding lace at the collar and cuffs to make it suitable for a bride. Grant ordered a new suit from St. Louis, and Samuel insisted on matching boots for the occasion. 3 days before the wedding, as Olivia was putting the finishing touches on the holiday pageant, Mayor Dixon summoned her to his office. His expression was grave as he motioned her to a seat across from his desk. "Miss Harrington, it has come to my attention that you intend to marry Mr. Eastwood on Christmas Eve." "Yes, that's correct," Olivia confirmed, puzzled by his serious tone. "I must remind you of the terms of your contract with the Leavenworth School Board." He shuffled through some papers, then read aloud. "The teacher will remain unmarried for the duration of her employment, and if she marries, this contract becomes null and void." Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December weather. "Are you saying I'll lose my position if I marry?" "That is the policy," Dixon said, not meeting her eyes. "It has always been thus. Female teachers are expected to devote themselves wholly to their pupils." "But that's absurd," Olivia protested. "My marital status has no bearing on my ability to teach. Nevertheless, the policy stands." The mayor cleared his throat awkwardly. "Of course, we would be willing to allow you to complete the current term through May as a courtesy to Mr. Eastwood, who is a prominent citizen." Olivia stood, anger stiffening her spine. "That won't be necessary, Mayor Dixon. I'll tender my resignation effective immediately." Now, Miss Harrington, there's no need for dramatics. It's not drama, it's principle, Olivia interrupted. If the school board values an outdated policy over the quality of education provided to the children of Leavenworth, then perhaps this isn't the right position for me after all. She left his office with her head high, though her heart was heavy. Teaching had brought her great joy, and the thought of abandoning her students mid-year troubled her deeply. But the choice between her profession and a life with Grant and Samuel was no choice at all. When she told Grant what had happened, his face darkened with anger. "This is Dixon's doing," he said flatly. "He's never forgiven me for opposing his railroad scheme last year." "What railroad scheme?" Olivia asked, distracted from her own troubles. Grant sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Dixon and some of his cronies have been trying to influence where the new spur line will be built. They've bought up land to the north of town that would increase in value tenfold if the railroad chose that route. And you oppose this." "I own land to the south that would make more sense for the railroad's shorter distance, easier terrain. Dixon offered to buy it from me at a fraction of its value. When I refused, he became difficult." Olivia shook her head, disgusted by the petty politics. "So this is his revenge. Forcing me to choose between teaching and marrying you, it would seem so." Grant took her hands in his. "Olivia, if you want to wait to finish out the school year, no," she said firmly. "I won't let Dixon's pettiness dictate our lives. Besides, I've been thinking about this for a while now." She smiled up at him. "There are children at the Double E and on neighboring ranches who can't get to town regularly for schooling. Perhaps I could teach them at the ranch, at least until proper arrangements can be made." Grant's expression softened. "You never cease to amaze me," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Finding opportunity where others see only obstacles." The news of Olivia's resignation spread through Leavenworth like wildfire, causing a division in the community. Many parents, particularly those whose children had thrived under her teaching, expressed outrage at the school board's decision to enforce the marriage clause. Others, influenced by Dixon's faction, muttered that it was for the best a teacher should be dedicated solely to her pupils. Samuel was devastated when Olivia told him she wouldn't be his teacher at the school anymore, but brightened considerably when she explained her plan to teach at the ranch. "So you'll be my teacher and my ma?" he asked, his face lighting up. "That's even better." On Christmas Eve, snow fell in gentle flakes as Olivia prepared for her wedding. Mrs. Wilson fussed over her dress and hair, hiding her own emotion behind brisk efficiency. "You'll do," she finally pronounced, stepping back to survey her handiwork. "Grant Eastwood won't know what hit him." The church was filled with candlelight and greenery, the scent of pine mingling with beeswax. Despite the controversy over Olivia's resignation, the pews were crowded with well-wishers, parents of her students, ranchers who respected Grant, and townspeople who simply loved a good wedding. Mayor Dixon was conspicuously absent, but Olivia hardly noticed. Her attention was fixed on the front of the church, where Grant waited with Samuel at his side, both of them handsome in their new suits, their faces reflecting a mixture of nervousness and joy. As Olivia walked down the aisle on the arm of Mr. Peterson, who had offered to give her away, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she belonged with these people, in this place that had unexpectedly become home. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. Grant's voice shook slightly as he recited his vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish Olivia all the days of his life. Samuel stood proudly beside his father, the rings balanced carefully on a small cushion Mrs. Wilson had sewn for the occasion. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Grant kissed Olivia with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. Samuel, unable to contain his excitement, let out a whoop that echoed through the church, causing laughter to ripple through the crowd. The celebration at the Double E afterward was joyous and relaxed. Neighbors brought food and drink, musicians played fiddles and banjos, and children darted between the adults, high on excitement and Christmas anticipation. Samuel proudly displayed his family drawing, now framed and hanging in a place of honor in the main room. As midnight approached, guests began to depart, leaving the new family alone in the quiet house. Samuel, exhausted but determined not to miss a moment of the special day, finally succumbed to sleep on the sofa. "I should put him to bed," Grant said, looking down at his sleeping son with affection. "Let me," Olivia said, gathering the boy into her arms. Though he was getting too big to be carried easily, she managed to take him upstairs to his room, removing his boots and tucking him under the quilt. "Mama," Samuel murmured drowsily as she smoothed his hair back from his forehead. The word brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "Yes, sweetheart." "Best Christmas ever," he mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. "It certainly is," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. When she returned downstairs, she found Grant waiting for her by the fire, his expression one of quiet contentment. "Mrs. Eastwood," he said softly, holding out his hand to her. "Mr. Eastwood," she replied, taking his hand and allowing him to pull her into his arms. "Happy?" he asked, searching her face. "Completely," she assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "This is where I was meant to be." Later, as they lay together in the bedroom that was now theirs, Grant traced the curve of Olivia's cheek with his finger. "I never thought I'd have this again," he admitted. "A complete family, a woman to love, a future to look forward to." "I never thought I'd find it at all," Olivia replied, nestling closer to his warmth. "I came west looking for independence, for a life of my own making. I never expected to find a ready-made family waiting for me." Grant chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I wouldn't exactly call Samuel and me ready-made, we were rather rough around the edges." "Perfect in your imperfection," Olivia corrected him, pressing a kiss to his chest. "Just as I am in mine." "Perfect," Grant agreed, tightening his arms around her. "Absolutely perfect." The winter of 1870-71 was one of the harshest in Kansas memory. Snow piled in drifts taller than a man, and temperatures plummeted so low that the creek behind the Double E froze solid enough to walk on. Travel between ranches became nearly impossible for weeks at a time, and Leavenworth itself was cut off from the outside world for much of January. For the newly formed Eastwood family, however, the isolation was a blessing in disguise. Grant, Olivia, and Samuel settled into a rhythm of daily life that strengthened their bonds. Mornings began with chores, feeding livestock, breaking ice in water troughs, keeping paths clear. After breakfast, Olivia would conduct lessons for Samuel at the kitchen table, supplementing his textbooks with practical knowledge Grant could provide. Afternoons were for household tasks, or when the weather allowed, for sledding on the hills behind the house or ice skating on the frozen creek. Evenings were spent by the fire, reading aloud, playing checkers, or simply talking about the future. In late January, as they sat together after supper, Samuel working on a new drawing while Grant and Olivia played chess, the boy looked up suddenly with a thoughtful expression. "What if my new brother or sister doesn't like me?" he asked. Grant's hand froze over the chessboard. "What makes you ask that, son?" Samuel shrugged, returning to his drawing. "Billy Johnson says his little sister is annoying and cries all the time. I was just wondering." Olivia and Grant exchanged startled looks across the table. They had discussed children, of course, but had assumed it would be some time before their family expanded. "Samuel," Olivia said carefully, "are you saying you want a brother or sister?" The boy nodded vigorously. "My drawing needs more people. A family should be big." Grant cleared his throat. "Well, that's something your mother and I will have to discuss, but it's not something that happens right away." Samuel looked unconvinced. "Mrs. Johnson had her baby real quick after she and Mr. Johnson got married. And Mrs. Wilson says you two are like lovebirds, always kissing when you think I'm not looking." Olivia felt her cheeks flame, while Grant appeared torn between embarrassment and laughter. "Samuel, that's enough personal observations for one evening," he managed to say with reasonable firmness. "Finish your drawing and then it's time for bed." Later, when they were alone, Grant pulled Olivia into his arms with a rueful smile. "So much for privacy in a small house," he murmured against her hair. Olivia laughed softly. "He's observant, I'll give him that, and not entirely wrong about what he's observed." Grant drew back slightly to look at her, his expression turning serious. "How would you feel about it? If Samuel's prediction came true sooner rather than later, about having a child?" Olivia's hand went instinctively to her midsection. "I'd be overjoyed, but it's soon, I know." "Life doesn't always follow our carefully laid plans," Grant said, his voice gentle. "Sometimes it gives us gifts when we least expect them. Like a dust storm bringing me to an outpost where a certain rancher and his son were waiting. Exactly like that." Grant kissed her softly, then with increasing passion as the fire burned low in the hearth. February brought a brief thaw, allowing ranch hands to check on distant cattle and Grant to make a much-needed journey into Leavenworth for supplies. Olivia remained at the ranch with Samuel, continuing their lessons and starting seeds in shallow boxes to be ready for spring planting. When Grant returned, he brought not only supplies but news and letters. Among them was a formal communication from the Leavenworth School Board requesting a meeting with Olivia. "What do you think they want?" she asked Grant as they unpacked the supplies. "Hard to say. Dixon's influence has waned somewhat since the railroad announced they're considering the southern route after all. Could be they're rethinking their position on married teachers." Olivia considered this as she shelved canned goods. "Would you mind if I taught at the school again?" "It would mean being away from home during the day." Grant came to stand behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "This is your home, but it isn't meant to be your prison," he said softly. "If teaching at the school is what you want, I'll support that. We'll make it work." Touched by his understanding, Olivia turned to embrace him. "Thank you, but honestly, I'm not sure what I want anymore. The idea of teaching at the ranch has grown on me, and there's Samuel to consider and possibly—" She trailed off, not yet ready to voice the suspicion that had been growing in her mind over the past few weeks. Grant didn't press, simply holding her close in the quiet kitchen. "Whatever you decide, we'll face it together. That's what family does." The meeting with the school board took place in early March, when the roads were finally clear enough for safe travel. Olivia rode into town with Grant, her mind racing with possibilities. What if they offered her position back? Would she take it? Could she balance teaching in town with her life at the ranch, especially if her suspicions proved correct to her surprise? The meeting included not only the school board but several parents from outlying ranches and farms. Mayor Dixon was present but unusually subdued, sitting at the end of the table rather than at its head. Mr. Peterson, now acting as chairman of the board, explained the purpose of the gathering. "Mrs. Eastwood, we've called you here today to discuss an alternative educational arrangement for the children of Leavenworth County." He went on to outline a plan whereby Olivia would establish a second school at the Double E, specifically serving children from ranches and farms too distant from town for regular attendance at the main school. The position would come with a modest salary and official recognition from the County Education Authority. "We've been impressed by your dedication to all the children of this community," Peterson concluded. "And while our original policy regarding married teachers stands for the town school, we see no reason why it should prevent you from educating those children currently underserved." Olivia looked at Grant, who squeezed her hand encouragingly. "It's an interesting proposal," she said carefully. "I would need to discuss the details with my husband, of course, but in principle, I'm very much in favor of such an arrangement." The meeting concluded with tentative plans for Olivia to begin the new school after the spring planting, when travel would be easier and families could commit to regular attendance for their children. As they rode back to the ranch, Grant and Olivia discussed the practical aspects where classes would be held, how many students to expect, what supplies would be needed. "We could convert the old bunkhouse," Grant suggested. "Now that we've built the new one closer to the barn, it's just sitting empty. It would make a fine schoolroom with some work. That would be perfect, Olivia agreed, her mind already racing with plans. We could add windows for better light, bookshelves along the walls. Grant laughed, reaching over to take her hand. I haven't seen you this excited since Christmas Eve. Olivia smiled, a secret happiness blooming within her. Well, I have more than one reason to be excited today. I confirmed something while we were in town. Grant reined the horses to a stop, turning to look at her with sudden intensity. Olivia, what are you saying? I'm saying that Samuel's prediction about needing to add to his family drawing may come true sooner than we expected. Around late August, if Dr. Miller's estimation is correct. For a moment, Grant sat perfectly still, his expression frozen in disbelief. Then, with a whoop that startled the horses, he gathered Olivia into his arms, nearly pulling her from her seat in his enthusiasm. A baby, he breathed against her hair. Our baby. Are you happy? Olivia asked, though his reaction left little doubt. Happy doesn't begin to describe it, Grant assured her, pulling back to look into her eyes. Are you? Is it too soon? I know we've only been married a few months. Olivia silenced him with a kiss. It's perfect timing, she said when they finally parted. Everything about us has happened in its own perfect time, hasn't it? They shared the news with Samuel that evening, watching as his face transformed from confusion to understanding to utter delight. I knew it. He exclaimed, jumping up from the table. I told Billy Johnson we'd have a baby before his ma had another one. When is it coming? Will it be a brother or sister? Can I teach it to draw? Grant laughed, ruffling his son's hair. Slow down, partner. The baby won't be here until late summer, and we don't know yet if it's a boy or girl. But yes, you can certainly teach your new brother or sister to draw when they're old enough. Samuel raced upstairs and returned moments later with his latest drawing, the family portrait he had been working on for weeks. Now, Olivia saw with a catch in her throat, he had added a small figure held in her arms. See, I left room for the baby too, he said proudly. I knew our family wasn't finished yet. Spring brought new life to the double E in more ways than one. As Olivia's body changed with the growing child within her, the land around them transformed from winter's barrenness to vibrant green. Calves and foals were born, garden seeds sprouted, and the ranch hands returned from winter quarters to prepare for the busy season ahead. Grant and two of his men worked tirelessly to convert the old bunkhouse into a schoolroom, adding windows, building benches and desks, and constructing a small covered porch where children could eat their lunch on fine days. Olivia oversaw the transformation with growing excitement, ordering books and slates, maps and charts from catalogs that took weeks to arrive. By May, the new school was ready, and 8 children from neighboring ranches began attending classes 3 days a week. The arrangement worked better than anyone had anticipated. Parents were grateful for the opportunity to educate their children without the long, often dangerous journey to town. The children themselves thrived in the smaller setting, and Olivia found that teaching a multi-age group allowed for a flexibility and creativity she had never experienced in the more formal town school. Samuel, now learning alongside peers rather than as an isolated pupil, blossomed academically and socially. His artistic talents continued to develop, and Olivia made a point of incorporating drawing into many lessons, using Samuel's skills to inspire the other children. As summer approached and Olivia's pregnancy advanced, Grant hired a young woman from town to assist with household duties and help with the school. Jenny Miller, the doctor's niece, proved to be a capable and willing helper, allowing Olivia to rest when needed while ensuring the ranch continued to run smoothly. One evening in late June, as Olivia sat on the porch watching the sunset, her hands resting on her swollen abdomen, Grant joined her with 2 glasses of lemonade. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling into the chair beside her. Olivia smiled, accepting the cool drink gratefully. "I was just thinking about how different my life is from what I imagined when I left Boston. If anyone had told me then that I'd be sitting on the porch of a Kansas ranch, married to a cattle rancher, expecting a child and running a school from a converted bunkhouse, I would have thought them mad. "Regrets?" Grant asked, his voice casual though she detected a hint of anxiety beneath the question. "Not a single one," she assured him, reaching for his hand. "This life is richer, fuller, more meaningful than anything I could have planned for myself. It's as if the dust storm that brought me to you was fate's way of showing me where I truly belonged." Grant raised her hand to his lips. "I thank God for that dust storm every day," he said simply. August arrived with scorching heat that made Olivia's final weeks of pregnancy especially challenging. The ranch school had recessed for harvest time, giving her a chance to rest and prepare for the baby's arrival. Samuel divided his time between helping Grant with light ranch chores and working on a special surprise, a cradle he was building with the help of Peterson from the store, who had been a carpenter in his younger days. On the morning of August 25, as dawn broke over the eastern prairie, Olivia felt the first pains that signaled her labor had begun. Grant sent one of the hands racing to town for Dr. Miller, while Jenny prepared the bedroom and Samuel was dispatched to the kitchen to keep the fire stoked and water boiling. The labor progressed rapidly, too rapidly for the doctor to arrive before the baby made its appearance. Jenny, who had assisted her uncle at several births, calmly guided Olivia through the final stages while Grant held her hands, his face a mask of concern and wonder. "One more push," Jenny encouraged as Olivia gasped with effort. Moments later, a lusty cry filled the room and Jenny placed a squirming, red-faced infant on Olivia's chest. "You have a son, Mrs. Eastwood," she announced, her voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Grant's eyes filled with tears as he looked down at his wife and newborn child. "He's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the baby's small hand. "Just like his mother." They named him Thomas Grant Eastwood, Thomas after Olivia's father. When Samuel was finally allowed to enter the room, his face lit with such joy that Olivia felt her heart might burst with love for both her sons, the one she had given birth to, and the one who had claimed her heart from the moment she saw his drawing of a family with a space saved just for her. "He's so tiny," Samuel whispered, peering at his new brother with awe, "but his hands look strong. Do you think he'll be able to draw when he gets bigger?" "I have no doubt he'll have many talents," Grant said, resting his hand on Samuel's shoulder, "with you as his big brother to teach him." That evening, as dusk settled over the ranch and the first stars appeared in the vast Kansas sky, the small family gathered in Olivia and Grant's bedroom. Thomas slept peacefully in his mother's arms, while Samuel sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed, working on a new drawing. "What are you creating now?" Olivia asked, her voice soft so as not to wake the baby. Samuel held up his paper with pride. "Our family," he announced. "See, there's Pa and you holding Thomas and me, and I left some space over here." "More space?" Grant asked with a raised eyebrow. "Are you planning something we should know about?" Samuel shrugged, returning to his drawing. "A family should be big," he said matter-of-factly. "That's what you always say, Pa, and I think maybe Thomas might want a sister someday, or another brother, or maybe both." Grant and Olivia exchanged amused glances over their sons' heads. "Perhaps," Grant agreed, his eyes conveying a private message to his wife that made her cheeks flush with color. "But let's enjoy the family we have right now, shall we?" As night deepened and Samuel finally dozed off, curled at the foot of the bed with his drawing clutched in his hand, Grant carefully lifted him and carried him to his own room. When he returned, he stretched out beside Olivia, his arm protectively encircling both her and their newborn son. "Happy?" he asked, just as he had on their wedding night. "Beyond words," Olivia replied, leaning into his strength. "This is everything I never knew I wanted until I found it." "Found us," Grant corrected softly, "just as we found you." Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, washing the prairie clean and promising new growth for tomorrow. Inside the sturdy house built with love and determination, the Eastwood family slept, complete in a way that once seemed impossible, all because a dust storm, a boy's drawing, and a space saved beside Pa had brought them together against all odds. And in the years that followed, as the ranch prospered, and the family grew, with twin girls joining them 2 years after Thomas, Olivia often thought of that first drawing she had seen: a family with a space waiting to be filled. Samuel's childhood artwork, now framed and hanging in a place of honor in their home, had been not just a picture but a prophecy of the happiness they would find together on the Kansas prairie, the drawing of a family, complete, whole, loved.